Hey everyone, and welcome to another Game Explained discussion. I'm your host, Derek Bittner, and I'm joined today by Ash Paulson and John Cartwright to discuss the recently revealed Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity out of nowhere from Nintendo and coming out November 20th. It's just sort of like, oh yeah, here's a Zelda game. Here you go. What do you guys think?
Derek, excuse my language, but holy flip! That's how I feel about this.
Holy Calamity Ganon, I guess. Man, this came out of nowhere, as you guys said, and it's like we get to play the cool part of Breath of the Wild story. Finally! Like, it's not, you get to play 100 years later and all the cool stuff happened 100 years ago. We get to play the actual cool stuff now.
Yeah, Ash, at the end of the Champions Ballad, they show like a fully restored castle town, and it's like, for a few moments in a cutscene, it's like, man, I want to explore that place. You build it up again, you crushed it in the main game, but you're showing us it now. Let me explore it, and they just don't let you. But now it looks like we're actually going to finally go there, and I'm so thrilled to do that.
Same.
It'll be really cool to visit all the places around Hyrule Castle that we saw before and can now actually do something with, like Castletown, maybe even the Lon Lon Ranch. Who knows what else?
Oh, right. I forgot. Yeah, Lon Lon Ranch, and oh man, it's going to be so interesting to see. I mean, of course, we don't think it's going to be open world, but to see those different landmarks in the context of 100 years prior, that's super exciting.
Yeah, there's so many cool things about this, and if you look out through the trailer, you can see a bunch of landmarks that are directly from Breath of the Wild, but they have been built up again. Like, just outside Castletown, you can see some of the ruins aren't as crumbled, there's some certain structures which aren't there in the main game, so all that stuff's really cool. I am curious how they're going to mix it together, though, because Warriors, in its own, it merged fairly well with Zelda, but this is Breath of the Wild. Are they going to learn from any of the open-air design that Breath of the Wild had, or are they literally just taking Warriors and putting it in this world?
That is the big question, is whether or not it's open world like Breath of the Wild. Can we go anywhere and have this stuff set up? Can we explore and survive and all that? But the thing is, survival isn't really necessary in this one. This is a peaceful Hyrule for the most part, other than the attacks of Calamity Ganon. So I'm not sure if it's possible to really do the whole, like, well, we're surviving because not much of society is left. It makes me think there'll be level by level, but huge areas. That's my thought.
Can we climb? Yeah. Like, climbing is such a big part of Breath of the Wild. we saw the sprinting, which, there was in the first Hyrule Warriors as well, but it seemed a bit more similar to how you run in Breath of the Wild. So do you think you can climb anywhere? Because I think you've got to have climbing.
I would think so. That's such a huge part of Breath of the Wild's DNA, right? I mean, that's such a huge part of that game is just completely anchored around climbing. So I could see them maybe working that into the Warrior-style gameplay somehow, that maybe there's some sort of stamina mechanic that climbing will deplete, that could affect your ability to fight. I don't know. Who knows? But it feels like climbing does have to be a part of this, maybe to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that being a thing. I mean, they can go wild with it with the whole Warriors formula and have you fight loads of enemies while climbing. Who knows?
That's true. Yeah.
It's hard to say how much of the DNA is going to be Breath of the Wild, how much of the DNA is going to be Warriors, because, watching this, it's very obvious to see where the Warrior stuff comes in, the big, powerful attacks, the crazy looks, all that stuff. But what's very different from most Warriors games is seemingly a very limited cast. We'll probably only have, 6 playable characters? Link, Zelda, the 4 champions.
That's what it seems to be, yeah. It feels important, though. I think the context means everything here. The cutscenes look on par with Breath of the Wild, and the story hasn't really been told before. But it's also that sort of, you go in knowing it's going to be a sad ending. We've even seen the trailer, we see Zelda shedding a tear, barely being able to keep Calamity Ganon at bay. We all know what the story is, but elaborating on that's going to be the interesting part.
Well, that just automatically makes me think of Crisis Core. Like, this is like the Zelda version of Crisis Core, where you go in knowing the major beats of the story, but perhaps seeing how it actually happens and the connective tissue to get there may give us a completely different look at how that actually happens, or some extra context with that. But I do think there's a lot to be explored, even with a story that you know how it ends.
Uh-huh. And I also think there's a lot of weapon variety that we can have in there too, because Breath of the Wild has so many outfits, so many weapons to equip. And the first Hyrule Warriors had that too, to an extent, but you didn't really have the same impact of equipping different weapons, I didn't feel anyway. But we already know that if you pre-order the game, you're going to get a ladle to play with. So it seems like there'll be a pretty vast array of what weapons you can like hang on to. And we even see Zelda using like runes that we see her using the bombs in one of these screenshots, like throwing them rapidly. So it looks like there's going to be a lot of variety to what you can play with.
Yeah, and and I wouldn't put past the idea that there's there are probably going to be more playable characters than we expect. Like we were talking earlier about how it seems like Zelda and the Four Champions are the obvious ones, and that's true. But look at Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, right? And even the original Hyrule Warriors. That game is known for the insane amounts of characters it has, and pure fan service characters too. So even if they don't necessarily make sense in the context of the story, I could totally see there being like extra characters post-game, maybe all of the champion successors, but I feel like it's not just going to be that pool of playable characters, given the series history.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to have post-game stuff feature the other characters and, play with it a little bit, but have a more serious, focused main story and go from that idea. And going back to Crisis Core, Ash, it's apropos, but Crisis Core also had to kind of invent a villain so we could have like a more proper conclusion. True. And I do wonder if they'll go that route with Age of Calamity. Like, are we going to have like some sort of underling of Ganon that needs to be defeated, and we do defeat, but it's still a loss?
Maybe. It definitely seems like the Guardians are going to be a big threat. And on the box art, there's that little Guardian. So do we like befriend him or something, or what? He doesn't look menacing.
No, with Zelda being such a techie, I could totally see that being like her little friend and helps in battle or whatever, or something to that effect. There's definitely something going on, but I think it's really smart to have Zelda fight with the Sheikah Slate. We didn't really see her do much before. She doesn't have access to her powers, so get into that more sciencey side of things for her.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how all these characters play. Playing as Urbosa, like that's a dream come true. She looks awesome to play as.
Yeah.
And I think in one of the clips we see one of the Divine Beasts, and is that like an ultimate move that you can use, like a special move? Because that would be so cool.
That would
just
be
to summon
cool.
a giant wave from the sky or something.
Right.
Oh man, that'd be...
God, there's so many...
You're right, Ash, because that has so much potential. With you saying there's so many, because they could ease you into the idea of like, oh, I got these Guardians to do these massive final attacks, and then towards the end of the game, like, nope, turned against you, and you have to fight them now.
Yeah, one thing I really can't wait to see, actually, is how the memories sort of intertwine into this. Like, taking the stuff that we've already seen in Breath of the Wild. Like, we've seen that scene where Link and Zelda are in the rain and they're losing. I can't wait to see that again, but in the context of knowing what happens in the story now, like filling in the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the whole time I played Breath of the Wild, I was just thinking about, look at these cool characters that I don't get to, A, do anything with, like even play alongside, or B, play as. And this is that fantasy, like you get to live out that fantasy now of playing Urbosa, or Mipha, or Rivali, or Daruk, all of them. I mean, these characters were so underutilized in the main game. They were so interesting. They were, they were cool, and you wanted to see more of them. But because of the nature of the story, that just wasn't on the table. But this is that game now, and I didn't expect it, but I love it.
I just thought, do you think you're gonna have us play as the Guardians when they lose, like to each of the bosses? Like, are those bosses going to be in this game and you have to lose to them, or are you going to win and then something happens and they, like... That's the thing. This might be one of the more depressing Zelda games out there.
Oh, like, so you die as each
really
of the champions one by one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
I wonder if they're going to introduce something that they're setting up for Breath of the Wild 2. Like, I wonder if there's going to be some sort of... I don't know, something that happens that we weren't, privy to, or that maybe didn't exist in the lore of Breath of the Wild as we knew it when we played the original game, but they're coming up with something new that's going to, that we didn't know about previously, that's going to play into the story of the sequel.
Mm-hmm. There's got to be some sort of tease, in some capacity.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's like an epilogue, which happens maybe, like maybe between the events of Breath of the Wild 1 and 2. I don't know how much they can do in the war, though. I think this seems pretty focused on what sort of happened beforehand, but I definitely expect something to do with Breath of the Wild 2.
It definitely
I agree.
Has a great way of raising the stakes, like seeing all of the enemies pour out there, like all of Ganon's forces, having the Yiga clan there, like every aspect is kind of coming up against him, and it does feel like a war, especially seeing, the King of Hyrule commanding all of his troops. It's like, this feels like an epic.
Do you think this was planned from the get-go? Like, there's so much about Breath of the Wild's backstory that isn't told in the main game, and we have that whole wall that Impa shows us, which just has all these things that just aren't really told in that game. So do you think that they went into releasing Breath of the Wild knowing that there would be a Warriors spin-off?
I don't think so.
I want to say no, just because Breath of the Wild's development itself was so protracted. Maybe toward the end of Breath of the Wild's development period that came to pass, but I feel like it wasn't always planned that way. But I mean, who knows?
And
right?
it does kind of work in Nintendo's favor, because this is a nice in-between between this and Breath of the Wild 2. Like, people are ready for that.
In a few months.
Exactly. And, obviously no Breath of the Wild 2 this year. We haven't heard anything. They're still working on it, and it's a completely different team. They're just using, here's the assets, here's some direction, but they're able to do their own thing. It's a good way to hold people over until Breath of the Wild 2 is ready, and it's kind of brilliant, especially because with a Warriors game, you can have, I know people who played for easily over 100, 200, 500,000 hours in the original Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. There's plenty of content here to keep you busy.
For sure. I think I played over 100 hours myself, but I've got people on my friends list who are well over 1,000. There's so much content in these games. God, I can't wait for this. I don't know if I'm more excited just because of the story, because honestly, I like the Warriors games, but they're not like my favorite genre of all time. And I think just the premise is selling me. Like Fire Emblem Warriors, for instance, was a fine game, but it also didn't feel very important. Like, the story had no real impact on anything. It didn't have the fan service that the first Hyrule Warriors had. Whereas this, just from the get-go, just the premise is so much more interesting than even the first Hyrule Warriors was. So I'm so in for this.
It felt like, both Hyrule Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors, they were the typical crossover game, right? Great games, and they were a lot of fun to play. There's tons of content, but story-wise, they were contrived. They basically existed as little more than an excuse to bring all these different Zelda games and all these different Fire Emblem games together, all the characters together into one world. This is being built for a different reason. This is built to tell a story that already exists in another game. This is expanding the lore of Breath of the Wild. It doesn't need to act as a crossover first and foremost. This is a Breath of the Wild Warriors game. And so in that sense, it's being positioned differently. It actually is important to the story. And so if you're not just there for the gameplay and you're a big Zelda lore nerd, there's a lot more for you here than there was in the original Hyrule Warriors.
It's very comparable to Persona 5 Scramble, which was positioned almost as a sequel, if not outright as a sequel. I mean, it was that trailer where it was Persona 5 2, and then it became Scramble. And, you can think of it in the same way, where it's like using this type of gameplay to expand. And based off of what I played of Scramble, it's very possible that this could be much more like Breath of the Wild than we thought. Just because it seems like when Koei Tecmo works a bit more closely with these teams, they and kind of ties into the storyline, they adapt the gameplay much more. Like Scramble, the little bit I played of it, didn't really feel like a Warriors game. To a degree it did, but it more felt like an action RPG version of Persona, which gave it its own unique flavor. And maybe Hyrule Warriors, this Age of Calamity could be Breath of the Wild with just a lot more action. Who knows if that'll be the case, but that'd be crazy if they pull it off to that degree.
I can for sure see it being there. I mean, in the trailer they say they're working hard with the Zelda team, which they didn't do for the first game. They even say that like almost word for word like that. And you can tell just looking at it. Like, this art style looks like it could be pulled directly from Breath of the Wild. Like, I'm looking at screenshots at the moment, and if it weren't for the insane enemy count, I think I'd be looking at Breath of the Wild screenshot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I love that it not only, obviously is being billed as a Breath of the Wild prequel that is expanding that game's lore, but it looks like it belongs in that universe too because it uses the same art style. And I love that visual identity that you get from it. Just by looking at it in a second, you can tell, oh, this is Breath of the Wild. And I just think that's so cool.
Yeah, there's just something wonderful about it. And you're right, Ash, with the when you said earlier with I am probably more invested in the story possibilities of this, especially from that trailer, seeing like Rivali and Link fight. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Right.
If there's like a, if they have that little extra battle there, or sort of to get you started, like how did Link meet all the champions? How were they recruited? All that stuff. Like, how is that all done? Like, there's so much story potential to flesh out their characters, flesh out Zelda's character, Link's character, the build up to it. There's an easy 15 to 20 hour main campaign.
Definitely. And like, even though we weren't necessarily expecting a Warriors game, I don't think anyone was, when you really think about the context of the story, it fits perfectly. It fits like a glove. I mean, you keep hearing about about the Great War that happened, and the war between Hyrule and Calamity Ganon. It's a war. It's armies, and it fits perfectly. Like, when you think about it in hindsight, it's like, oh wow, this was waiting to happen. But I don't think at least I don't know anybody who thought about that beforehand. So it's really interesting when you look back in hindsight. Like, wow, that actually kind of fits like a glove story-wise.
It does, yeah. And also just Switch's schedule too. Like, people have been complaining a bit that it's pretty empty, and it is. We've got Pikmin 3 coming up, we've got Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and those are great games, but they're also games we've already played before. Whereas this is something brand new, and it's coming in. It's currently September, right? So it's coming in like 2 months.
Yeah,
3 months,
a little
whatever.
over 2 months, and that's their big holiday game. We now know what their big holiday game is, and it's this.
Yeah. So, oh god, it's just such a good surprise, and that doesn't happen very often. It's nice to have just this welcome, unexpected surprise, and it didn't leak, which I love. I hate when these big things leak and then expectations are going wild, but now we can just look at it and be like, whoa, this is coming so soon. I can't wait for it.
Nobody had any idea this was coming, so that makes it all the better. I love when these announcements can just catch you off guard like this, and I'm 100% sold on this game.
Yeah.
Oh, easily, right out of the gate. I mean, as soon as I saw what I was looking at, I'm like, oh, well, I know what I'm doing come November. Like, I am so excited about this.
Well, do we have any other thoughts on Age of Calamity, or should we get started on a lot of other coverage on this?
I think we have to get to work now.
Yeah, I think so.
I have one thing to say that I'm just going to throw the possibility out there. We also know more Smash DLCs coming, and now we have 4 playable champions with completely refreshed new movesets for Sakurai to pull from. So I'm just saying, what if one of these upcoming characters is a Zelda DLC character, Breath of the Wild champion type? I'm just putting the speculation out there. Do with it what you will, but I feel like there could be something there, possibly. Who knows?
We need a Bosa. We need her now.
Exactly.
Oh, man,
I'm thinking
Urbosa
playable Urbosa. I mean, I know it's unpopular. I'm so excited to play as Mipha. I always thought she was super cool, and I'm so excited to play as both her and Urbosa. Oh man, I'm so excited about this.
I've always had a soft spot for Rivali, so I'm down.
Yeah, nice. Poor Daruk. I'll play as Daruk too. He's there as well.
I mean, he's huggable.
Poor guy. Yeah, he's huggable.
I'll be honest. I like Daruk more than Darunia, but
Me too.
He has strong competition with the other champions.
And I will say he gets one of the coolest moments in the trailer because he has that finishing move he does where he makes a fist and like the enemies explode behind him. So that was a really cool moment. That was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. But yeah, I think that covers it for our Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity reveal discussion. So thank you for watching, and if you like this video, be sure to like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain, and of course be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more on Hyrule Warriors, including a let's be honest, we're analyzing this thing, and other things gaming as well. Until next time, bye.